LeBron James, tired after a long day, decided to grab a quick meal at a cozy, local restaurant. He and his friend had spent hours shopping and were looking for a quiet place to relax. They spotted a small spot across the street called the Gourmet Hub and decided to give it a try. Little did they know, this ordinary stop would lead to an extraordinary moment. Sandra was a young, hardworking waitress at a small restaurant called the Gourmet Hub. She had been working there for a few months, always showing up with a bright smile and a warm attitude. To anyone who met her, it was clear she loved her job, not just for the money, but because she enjoyed meeting people and making their day a little better. But Sandra's life wasn't easy. She dreamed of becoming a nurse, a goal she had been working toward for years. She had already applied to nursing school and was waiting for a response, but until then, she worked long shifts at the restaurant to save money for tuition. At home, Sandra also cared for her mother, who was recovering from surgery. Balancing work, family, and her dreams was tough, but Sandra never let it show. Her dedication and kindness didn't go unnoticed. Regular customers adored her for the way she made everyone feel welcome. Whether it was a kind word, a thoughtful gesture, or just her cheerful smile, Sandra had a way of making people feel special. Some even left her small gifts, a favorite candle or a handwritten thank you note, just to show their appreciation. Despite her own struggles, Sandra always looked for ways to brighten others' days. She believed that every little act of kindness mattered and carried this belief with her in everything she did. For Sandra, her job wasn't just a stepping stone to her future, it was also a chance to touch lives and spread positivity. Though life wasn't easy, Sandra stayed hopeful. She knew that every day brought her one step closer to her dream, and she was determined to keep going, no matter how hard things got. It was an ordinary evening at the Gourmet Hub, with the usual mix of locals and a few travelers enjoying their meals. Sandra was busy, attending to her tables, her notepad in hand and her warm smile lighting up the room. As she moved between customers, a sudden murmur began to spread across the restaurant. People started whispering and glancing toward the entrance. Sandra paused for a moment, curious about the commotion. She glanced toward the door and froze. Walking in was none other than LeBron James, the basketball superstar. His tall frame and confident stride immediately caught everyone's attention. Customers gasped in recognition, some fumbling for their phones to snap a picture. Even the kitchen staff peeked out from behind the counter, trying to catch a glimpse of the sports icon. Sandra's heart raced. She had never expected someone like LeBron James to walk into their small, local restaurant. For a moment, she stood rooted to the spot, a mix of excitement and nervousness washing over her. But then she took a deep breath and reminded herself to stay calm. He was a customer like anyone else, and she had a job to do. With her signature professionalism, Sandra approached LeBron's table with a welcoming smile. "Good evening, Mr. James. Welcome to the Gourmet Hub. My name is Sandra, and I'll be taking care of you tonight," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. LeBron smiled back warmly. "Thanks, Sandra. It's great to be here," he replied. She led him and his associate to a cozy corner table, offering them menus and suggesting a few customer favorites. Throughout the interaction, Sandra maintained her composure, treating LeBron with the same kindness and attention she gave to every guest. Meanwhile, the restaurant buzzed with excitement. Customers whispered and pointed, but LeBron seemed unfazed, focusing on his meal and the conversation at his table. Sandra checked in periodically, making sure everything was to his liking. Despite the awe she felt, Sandra stayed true to herself, kind, professional, and warm. As she moved between tables, she couldn't help but smile, knowing this was a moment she would remember for a lifetime. What she didn't know was that LeBron was just as impressed by her as she was by him. As Sandra returned to check on LeBron James and his companion, she noticed something different about him. Unlike other famous personalities she had read about, LeBron didn't seem to carry an air of superiority. Instead, he was relaxed, approachable, and genuinely engaged in the moment. His smile was warm, and his demeanor was calm, making the restaurant feel lighter and brighter with his presence. After ensuring their meals were perfect, Sandra paused briefly to ask, "Is there anything else I can get for you?" LeBron looked up at her, his eyes kind and curious. "No, everything's great. Thank you, Sandra," he said. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he added, "You're really good at what you do. It's clear you care about people." Sandra's cheeks flushed slightly at the compliment. "Thank you. I just try my best to make people feel welcome," she replied with a modest smile. LeBron tilted his head, intrigued. "If you don't mind me asking, how long have you been working here?" Sandra hesitated for a second. It wasn't often that customers showed this much interest in her story, let alone someone as well known as LeBron James. "A few months now," she began. "I'm saving up for nursing school, so this job helps me with that. Plus, it's nice meeting so many different people. Nursing school, huh? LeBron said, leaning slightly forward. That's impressive. What made you want to be a nurse? Sandra's face lit up at the question. I've always loved helping people, she explained. My mom had surgery recently, and I've been taking care of her at home. Seeing how much nurses made a difference in her recovery inspired me. I realized I wanted to do the same for others, to be there for them, in their toughest moments. LeBron listened intently, nodding as she spoke. That's a big dream, and it sounds like you're working hard to make it happen, he said thoughtfully. I'm trying, Sandra admitted with a small laugh. It's not easy balancing everything, work, saving, and taking care of my mom, but I know it'll all be worth it, in the end. LeBron's expression softened. He admired her determination and selflessness. You've got the right mindset, Sandra. It's not just about where you are now, it's about where you're headed, he said. Sandra smiled, feeling a renewed sense of hope. That's exactly how I see it. Every step counts, even the small ones. They continued chatting for a few more minutes, their conversation flowing naturally. LeBron shared a bit about his own journey, how he had faced challenges growing up, but always kept his focus on his goals. He encouraged Sandra to stay determined and reminded her that hard work and kindness could take her far. For Sandra, it was a conversation she wouldn't forget. LeBron's words weren't just kind, they were inspiring. As she walked away to tend to another table, she couldn't help but feel a little stronger, a little more confident, and a lot more hopeful about her future. As the evening wore on, the restaurant began to quiet down. The dinner rush had ended, and only a handful of customers remained. LeBron James and his companion sat at their table, finishing their meals and chatting softly. Sandra kept a watchful eye on their table, ensuring they had everything they needed without intruding on their conversation. When it seemed they were ready to leave, Sandra approached with a warm smile. Was everything to your liking? She asked. LeBron looked up, his expression genuine. It was perfect, Sandra. Thank you for taking such great care of us. The pleasure was all mine, Sandra replied. You've been a wonderful guest. LeBron nodded, reaching for the bill Sandra had placed on the table earlier. He opened his wallet and paused, his expression thoughtful. Sandra assumed he was calculating the tip, as most customers did, and moved to check on another table. As she walked away, LeBron leaned in closer to the receipt, his pen moving across the paper. He wrote something additional beneath the standard line for the tip, folded the receipt carefully, and placed it back on the table. When Sandra returned a few moments later, she noticed they were standing up to leave. LeBron extended his hand, and she shook it warmly. Thank you again, Sandra. Your kindness made this meal truly special. Sandra smiled, a little taken aback by his sincerity. Thank you, Mr. James. Have a wonderful evening. As LeBron and his companion exited the restaurant, the remaining customers watched them go, whispering excitedly about the star athlete's visit. Meanwhile, Sandra went to clear their table. She picked up the folded receipt and unfolded it to process the payment. Her eyes widened as she saw the tip amount, $300 on a bill of just $27. For a moment, she thought she must have read it wrong, but the numbers were clear. Beneath the total, a note was written in neat, thoughtful handwriting. Sandra, your kindness and hard work shine brighter than any spotlight. Keep going, and never give up on your dreams. Sandra froze, the receipt trembling slightly in her hands. A wave of emotion swept over her as tears welled up in her eyes. She had received tips before, even generous ones, but nothing like this. The money was incredible and would make a significant difference in her savings for nursing school. But it was the words that moved her the most. For someone like LeBron James to take the time to acknowledge her efforts and write such a heartfelt message made her feel truly seen and appreciated. It was a validation of all the hard work, the long hours, and the sacrifices she had made. Sandra stood for a moment, overwhelmed, before sharing the note with her coworkers. "Nah," her colleague gasped. "That's amazing, Sandra. He must have really seen something special in you." Marcus, the chef, glanced at the note and let out a low whistle. "This isn't just a tip, it's a message. He believes in you, Sandra." Sandra nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, but her smile was radiant. "It's not just the money," she said softly. "It's the fact that he noticed, that he cared enough to write this." For the rest of her shift, Sandra kept the note close, rereading it whenever she had a quiet moment. When the night ended and she stepped out into the cool evening air, she felt lighter than she had in months. LeBron's gesture wasn't just a tip, it was a reminder of her worth, her potential, and her dreams. It was proof that even the smallest acts of kindness could have a profound impact, and it gave her the motivation to keep moving forward, no matter how hard the journey might seem. As Sandra stared at the receipt in her hands, her vision blurred with tears. The $300 tip was an incredible gesture, but it was the heartfelt note beneath it that truly struck her. Sandra, your kindness and hard work shine brighter than any spotlight. Keep going, and never give up on your dreams. She pressed the receipt to her chest, her emotions swirling. It wasn't just about the money, though it would help her immensely with her nursing school savings. It was about being seen, truly seen, for her hard work, kindness, and dedication by someone as iconic as LeBron James. The thought that someone of his stature had taken the time to recognize and appreciate her was almost too much to process. Sandra took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but her trembling hands gave her away. Now, her colleague noticed her standing frozen by the table and hurried over. Sandra, are you okay? She asked, concern etched on her face. Sandra couldn't speak at first. She simply handed Na the receipt. Na's eyes widened as she read it, her mouth falling open. Oh my God, Sandra, this is amazing. By now, Marcus, the head chef, had stepped out of the kitchen to see what was happening. What's all the fuss about? He asked, wiping his hands on his apron. Na waved the receipt at him. Look at this, she said, excitement in her voice. Marcus read it, his brow lifting in surprise. He let out a low whistle. Well, if this doesn't make your day, I don't know what will. Sandra, this is incredible. Sandra finally found her voice, though it was shaky with emotion. It's not just the money, she said softly. It's the note. He didn't have to do this, but he did. It's like he saw me, really saw me. Na smiled and pulled Sandra into a hug. You deserve this, Sandra. You're the heart of this place. And now someone outside of here sees it too. The other staff gathered around, offering their congratulations and sharing in her joy. The small restaurant, usually bustling with activity, felt more like a family home in that moment. Sandra carefully folded the receipt and tucked it into her pocket, knowing she would treasure it forever. For her, this wasn't just a tip or a gesture. It was a reminder of her worth and her dreams. It was proof that kindness and hard work never go unnoticed. The next day, Sandra couldn't stop thinking about LeBron's kindness. His words had stayed with her, filling her with a sense of hope and purpose. She carried that feeling into her day, determined to spread the same positivity that had been shown to her. As her shift ended that evening, Sandra decided to take a longer route home. The cool breeze felt refreshing as she walked, reflecting on the changes she wanted to make in her life. Along the way, she noticed an elderly man struggling with several heavy grocery bags. He paused every few steps, clearly exhausted. Without hesitation, Sandra approached him with a warm smile. Would you like some help with those? She offered. The man looked up, surprised but grateful. Thank you, dear. These old arms aren't what they used to be, he said with a chuckle. Sandra took a few bags from him, adjusting them comfortably in her hands. They began walking toward his apartment, just a few blocks away. Along the way, they chatted about the city, his family, and how things had changed over the years. The man's stories made Sandra smile, and she felt a deep sense of connection with him. When they reached his door, he turned to her with a warm smile. You're a kind soul, he said. The world needs more people like you. Sandra felt a familiar warmth in her chest, the same feeling she'd had after LeBron's gesture. I was just passing on the kindness shown to me, she replied. The man nodded knowingly. Keep doing what you're doing. It matters. Later that evening, back at the restaurant, Sandra noticed a young man sitting alone at one of her tables. He looked anxious, fidgeting with the menu and avoiding eye contact. When she approached, he hesitated before softly admitting, I don't have any money. I just needed a place to sit for a while. Sandra felt a pang of empathy. Wait here, she said gently. She spoke with the chef, and together they prepared a warm meal. Placing the plate in front of the young man, Sandra said, This one's on us. Everyone deserves a good meal. The young man's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, he said, his voice breaking. I won't forget this. Sandra smiled. Just pay it forward when you can. As the night ended, Sandra realized how powerful small acts of kindness could be. Inspired by LeBron's gesture, she was determined to keep spreading the light. A few weeks after that unforgettable evening, Sandra returned home to find a letter waiting for her. Her heart raced as she saw the logo of the nursing school she had applied to. With trembling hands, she opened it and began to read. Congratulations, Sandra. We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted. Sandra's eyes filled with tears as she read the words over and over again. It felt like a dream come true. All her hard work, late nights, and sacrifices had finally paid off. The next day at work, she couldn't keep the news to herself. During a quiet moment, she gathered her coworkers in the kitchen. I got in, she announced, holding up the letter with a wide grin. Na let out a loud cheer and pulled Sandra into a hug. This is amazing. We knew you could do it. Marcus, the head chef, gave her a proud nod. Dinner's on me tonight. We're celebrating our future nurse. That evening, The restaurant felt more like a family gathering. Laughter filled the air as they shared stories and toasted to Sandra's success. Sitting among her co-workers, Sandra felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. As she raised her glass for a toast, she said, "I couldn't have done this without all of you. Your support means the world to me." Her mind drifted back to the moment when LeBron James had left that generous tip and heartfelt note. It wasn't just the money, it was the belief he showed in her, the encouragement that reignited her determination. Sandra smiled, knowing this was only the beginning. LeBron's gesture had been the spark, but now it was up to her to keep the fire burning. With her nursing school journey ahead, she was ready to make her dreams a reality. As the celebration at the Gourmet Hub wound down, Sandra looked around at her coworkers, her heart full of gratitude. The journey to this moment hadn't been easy, but every challenge had brought her closer to her dream. She stood, raising her glass, a warm smile spreading across her face. "I want to thank all of you," she began, her voice steady but emotional, "for your support, your encouragement, and for believing in me. This isn't just my achievement, it's ours. You've been like a second family to me, and I'm so grateful." The small group cheered, raising their glasses in response. Sandra paused for a moment, her thoughts drifting to the night LeBron James had walked through the restaurant doors. His simple yet profound gesture had been a turning point, a reminder that even small acts of kindness could have a life-changing impact. "To kindness," she said, her voice strong, "it has the power to transform lives, to inspire, and to remind us that we're never truly alone. I hope we can all continue to share it in our own ways, no matter how small. Every act of kindness matters." The group echoed her sentiment, clinking their glasses together. As Sandra sat back down, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The kindness LeBron had shown her had set off a ripple effect, inspiring her to help others. Whether it was assisting an elderly man, offering a meal to someone in need, or simply being a listening ear, she knew she wanted to pay forward the light that had been shared with her. The story wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone she could impact along the way. With a heart full of hope and determination, Sandra was ready to carry kindness into every step of her journey.